Understanding immortality. Can it be said that man possesses immortality? Immortality is one of the qualities we ascribe to people without having sufficient understanding of their meaning. Other qualities of this kind are individuality, in the sense of an inner unity, a permanent and unchangeable I, consciousness and will. All these qualities can belong to a person, but this does not mean that they do belong to them, or belong to each and every one of us. In order to understand what mankind is at the present time, that is at our current level of development, it is necessary to imagine to a certain extent what we can be, or what we might attain. Only by understanding the correct sequence of development possible, will people cease to ascribe to themselves what at present they do not possess, and what perhaps they can only acquire after great effort and great labor. According to an ancient teaching, traces of which can be found in many systems, old and new, a person who has attained the fullest development possible, one in the fullest sense of the word, consists of 4 bodies. These 4 bodies are composed of substances that gradually become finer and finer, mutually interpenetrate one another and form 4 independent organisms, standing in a definite relationship to one another, but capable of independent action. The reason why it is possible for 4 bodies to exist is that the human organism, that is the physical body, has such a complex organization that under certain conditions, a new independent organism can grow within it, affording a more convenient and responsive instrument for the activity of consciousness than basic material being. The consciousness manifested in this new body is capable of governing it, and it has full power and full control over the physical body. In this second body, under certain conditions a third body might grow, again having characteristics of its own. The consciousness manifested in this third body has full power and control over the first 2 bodies, and the third body possesses the possibility of acquiring knowledge inaccessible either to the first, or to the second body. In the third body under certain conditions, a fourth can grow which differs as much as the third differs from the second, and the second from the first. The consciousness manifested in the fourth body has full control over the first 3 bodies, and of itself. These 4 bodies are defined in different teachings in various ways. The first is the physical body, in Christian terminology the carnal body, the second, in Christian terminology is the natural body, the third is the spiritual body, and the fourth in the terminology of esoteric Christianity, is the divine body. In theosophical terminology the first is the physical body, the second is the astral body, the third is the mental, and the fourth is the causal. That is the body that bears the causes of its actions within itself, is independent of external causes, and is the body of will. In the terminology of certain Eastern teachings the first body is the carriage or physical body, the second body is the horse, feelings and desires, the third the driver or mind, and the fourth is master, I, consciousness and will. Such comparisons and parallels may be found in most systems and teachings that recognize something more in man than the physical body. However, almost all of these teachings, whilst repeating in a more or less familiar form the definitions and divisions of the ancient teachings, have forgotten or omitted its most important feature. Namely, that man is not born with the finer bodies, and they can only be artificially cultivated in him provided that favorable conditions, both internal and external, are present. The astral body is not an indispensable implement for man. It is a great luxury that few can afford. A person can live quite well without an astral body. Their physical body possesses all the instinctive functions necessary for life. A person without an astral body may even produce the impression of being a very intellectual, or a spiritual individual, thus deceiving not only others but also themselves. This applies still more of course to the mental and fourth body. Ordinary people do not possess these bodies or their corresponding functions, but often think and make others think that they do. The reasons for this are, first, the fact that the physical body works with the same substances of which the higher bodies are composed, only these substances are not crystallized and do not belong to them. Secondly, it has all the functions analogous to those of the higher bodies, though of course they differ from it considerably. The chief differences between the functions of a person possessing the physical body only and the functions of the 4 bodies, is that in the first instance, the functions of the physical body govern all their other functions. In other words, everything is governed by the body which in its turn, is governed by external influences. In the second case, the command or control emanates from the higher body. The functions of the physical body may be represented as parallel to the functions of the 4 bodies. In the first case, that is in relation to the functions of a person of physical body only, the automaton depends upon the physical body and the external influences it receives. Desires or aversions such as I want, I don't want, I like and I don't like, that is, functions occupying the place of the second body, depend upon accidental shocks and external influences. Thinking, which corresponds to the functions of the third body, is an entirely mechanical process. Will is absent in ordinary mechanical man, they have desires only, and a greater or lesser permanence of desires or wishes is called a strong or a weak will. In the second case, that is in relation to the functions of the four bodies, the automatism of the physical body depends upon the influences of the other bodies. Instead of the discordant and often contradictory activity of different desires, there is one single I, whole, indivisible and permanent. There is individuality, dominating the physical body and its desires, able to overcome both its reluctance and its resistance. Instead of the mechanical process of thinking, there is consciousness, and there is will, is a power, not merely composed of various often contradictory desires belonging to different I's, but issuing from consciousness and governed by individuality or a single and permanent I. Only such a will can be called free, for it is independent of accident and cannot be altered or directed from without. An Eastern teaching describes the functions of the four bodies, their gradual growth and the conditions for this growth in the following way. Let us imagine a vessel or a retort filled with various metallic powders. The powders are not in any way connected with each other, and every accidental change in the position of the retort changes the relative position of the powders. If the retort is shaken or tapped with the finger, then the powder that was at the top may appear at the bottom or in the middle, while the one that was at the bottom may appear at the top. There is nothing permanent in the position of the powders, and under such conditions there can be nothing permanent. This is an exact picture of our psychic life. Each succeeding moment, new influences may change the position of the powder that is on the top, and put in its place another which is absolutely its opposite. Science calls this state of the powders, the state of mechanical mixture. The essential characteristic of the interrelation of the powders to one another in this kind of mixture is the instability of these interrelations, and their variability. It is impossible to stabilize the interrelation of powders in a state of mechanical mixture. However the powders may be fused, the nature of the powders makes this possible. To do this, a special kind of fire must be lit under the retort which by heating and melting the powders, finally fuses them together. Fused in this manner the powders will be in the state of a chemical compound, and now they can no longer be separated by those simple methods that separated, and made them change places when they were in a state of mechanical mixture. The content of the retort will have become indivisible or individual. This is the picture of the formation of the second body. The fire by means of which fusion is attained is produced by friction, which in its turn is produced in us by the struggle between yes and no. If a person gives way to all of their desires or panders to them, then there will be no inner struggle within them, no friction and no flame or fire to heat the retort. But if, for the sake of attaining a definite aim, they struggle with desires that hinder them, they will then create a fire that can gradually transform their inner world into a single whole. To return then to our example, the chemical compound obtained by fusion possesses certain qualities, a certain specific gravity, a certain electrical conductivity and so on. These qualities constitute the characteristics of the substance in question. However, by means of work upon it of a certain kind, the number of these characteristics may be increased, that is, the alloy may be given new properties that did not primarily belong to it. It may, for example, be possible to magnetize it, to make it radioactive and so on. The process of imparting new properties to the alloy corresponds to the process of the formation of the third body, the acquisition of new knowledge and powers with the help of this third body. Once the third body has been formed, and has acquired all the properties, powers and knowledge possible for it, there remains the problem of fixing this knowledge and these powers. Because having been imparted to it by influences of a certain kind, they may equally be taken away by these same influences, or by others. By means of a special kind of work for all three bodies, the acquired properties can be made the permanent and inalienable possession of the third body. The process of fixing these acquired properties corresponds to the process of the formation of the fourth body, and only a person who possesses four fully developed bodies can be called man in the full sense of the word. This individual possesses many properties which ordinary people do not possess. One of these properties is immortality. All religions and all ancient teachings contain the idea that, by acquiring the fourth body we acquire immortality, and they all contain indications of the way to acquire the fourth body, that is immortality. In this regard, certain teachings compare man to a house containing 4 rooms. Man lives in one room, the smallest and the poorest of all, and until he is told of it, he does not suspect the existence of the other rooms that are full of treasure. When he does learn of this, he begins to seek the keys of these rooms and particularly to the fourth, the most important room of the house. Once a man has found his way into this room, he becomes the master of his own house, for only then does the house truly belong to him wholly and forever. The fourth room gives man immortality, and all religious teachings strive to show the way to it. There are a great many ways, some shorter and some longer, some harder and some easier, but all, without exception, lead or strive to lead in one direction, that is to immortality. Immortality is not a property with which man is born. However, we can acquire immortality. All existing and generally known ways to immortality can be divided into 3 categories. 1. The way of the fakir. 2. The way of the monk. 3. The way of the yogi. The way of the fakir is the way of struggle with the physical body, the way of work on the first room of the house. This is a long, difficult and uncertain way. The fakir strives to develop physical will or power over the body. The whole way of the fakir consists of various incredibly difficult physical exercises. The fakir either stands motionless in the same position for hours, days, months or even years. Sits with outstretched arms on a bare stone in sun, rain and snow. Tortures themselves with fire, puts their legs into an ant-heap and so on. If they do not fall ill and die before what may be called physical will is developed within them, then they attain the 4th room or the possibility of forming the 4th body. However, their other functions, emotional, intellectual and so forth, remain undeveloped. They have acquired will, but have nothing to which they can apply it. They cannot make use of it for gaining knowledge or for self-perfection. As a rule, they are too old to begin new work. However, where there are schools of fakirs, there are also schools of yogis, and yogis generally keep an eye on fakirs. If a fakir attains what they have aspired to before they grow too old, they take them into a yogi school, where first they heal them and restore their power of movement through physiotherapy, and then begin to teach them. A fakir has to learn to walk and to speak like a baby. But they now possess a will that has overcome incredible difficulties along the way, and this may help them to overcome the difficulties on the second part of the way. The difficulties namely of developing intellectual and emotional functions. We cannot imagine what hardship fakirs undergo. Most people have never seen real fakirs. Within the inner court of a temple in India could once be found one such man, who for 20 years had been standing on the tips of his fingers and toes. He was no longer able to straighten himself, and his pupils had to carry him from one place to another, take him to the river and wash him, like some inanimate object. This was however not attained all at once. They had to overcome and suffer great tortures in order to get to that stage. A person becomes a fakir not because they understand the possibilities and the results of the way, and not because of religious feeling. In all Eastern countries where fakirs exist, there is a custom among the common people of promising to give to fakirs a child born after some happy event. Aside from this, fakirs often adopt orphans, or simply buy little children from poor parents. These children become their pupils and imitate them, or are made to imitate them, some only outwardly, but some afterwards become fakirs themselves. In addition to these, other people become fakirs simply from being struck by some fakir that they have seen. Near every fakir in the temples people can be seen who imitate them, who sit or stand in the same posture. Not for long of course, but still occasionally for several hours. Sometimes it happens that an individual who went to the temple accidentally on a feast day, and began to imitate some fakir who particularly struck them, does not return home anymore but joins the crowd of that fakir's disciples. Then later, in the course of time becomes a fakir themselves. It is important to understand that the word fakir is taken in quotation marks. In Iraq or Iran the word fakir simply means a beggar, and in India a great many jugglers call themselves fakirs. Europeans, particularly learned Europeans, often give the name of fakir to yogis, and to monks of various wandering orders. In reality, the way of the fakir, the way of the monk and the way of the yogi are entirely different. So far, the way of the fakir, the first way has been spoken of only. The second way is the way of the monk. This is the way of faith, the way of religious feeling and of religious sacrifice. Only a person with very strong religious emotions and a very strong religious imagination can become a monk in the true sense of the word. The way of the monk is also long and very arduous. A monk spends years and even decades struggling with themselves, however all their work is concentrated in the second room of the house, on the second body, that is on feelings. Subjecting all their other emotions to one emotion, that is to faith, they develop unity within themselves, will over the emotions, and in this way reach the 4th room of the house. However their physical body, and their thinking capacities may remain undeveloped. In order to make use of what they have attained they must develop their body, and their capacity to think. This can only be attained by means of fresh sacrifices, fresh hardships and fresh renunciations. A monk has to become a yogi and a fakir. Very few get as far as this, and even fewer overcome all difficulties. Most of them either die before achieving the goal, or become monks in outward appearance only. The third way is the way of the yogi. This is the way of knowledge, the way of mind. The way of the yogi consists of working on the 3rd room of the house, and in striving to enter the 4th room by means of knowledge. The yogi reaches the 4th room by developing their mind, However, the body and their emotions remain undeveloped, and like the fakir or the monk, they are unable to make use of the results of their attainment. They know everything, but can do nothing with that knowledge. In order to begin to do, they must gain mastery over their body, and over their emotions. That is, over the first and the second rooms of the house. To do this, they must again set to work, and again obtain results by means of prolonged effort. In this case, however, they have the advantage of understanding their position, of knowing what they lack, what they must do and in what direction they must go. However, as with the way of the fakir, or the way of the monk, very few acquire this understanding on the way of the yogi. That is, that level in their work on which a person knows where they are going. A great many stop at one particular achievement, and go no further. The ways also differ from one another by their relation to the teacher or the leader. On the way of the fakir, an individual has no teacher in the true sense of the word. The teacher in this case does not teach, but simply serves as an example. The pupil's work consists of imitating the teacher. On the way of the monk, a person has a teacher, and a part of their duty, a part of their work, consists in having absolute faith in the teacher, in submitting to them absolutely, in obedience. However, the chief thing on the way of the monk is faith in God, in the love of God, in constant efforts to obey and serve God. Although in their understanding of the idea of God, and of serving God, there may be much that is subjective and contradictory. On the way of the yogi, a person can do nothing, and must do nothing without a teacher. In the beginning they must imitate their teacher like the fakir and believe in them like the monk. However, afterwards, a person on the way of the yogi gradually becomes their own teacher. They learn their teacher's methods and gradually learn to apply them to themselves. All the ways, the way of the fakir, the way of the monk and the way of the yogi, have one thing in common. They all begin with the most difficult thing, with a complete change of life, with a renunciation of all worldly things. A person must give up their home, their family if they have one, renounce all pleasures, attachments and duties of life and go out into the desert, or into a monastery, or a yogi school. From the very first day, from the very first step on the way, they must die to the world. Only thus can they hope to attain anything on one of these ways. In order to grasp the essence of this teaching, it is necessary to clearly understand that the ways are the only possible method for the development of man's hidden possibilities. This in turn shows how difficult and rare such development is. The development of these possibilities is not a law. The law for man is existence within the circle of mechanical influences, the state of man-machine. The way of the development of hidden possibilities is a way against nature, against God. This explains the difficulties and the exclusiveness of the ways. The ways are narrow and straight, but at the same time only by them can anything be attained. In the general mess of everyday life, particularly modern life, the ways are a small and quite imperceptible phenomenon, which from the point of view of life, need not exist at all. However, this phenomenon contains within itself all that man has, for the development of hidden possibilities. The ways are opposed to everyday life, based upon other principles and subject to other laws. In this consists their power and their significance. In everyday life, even in a life filled with scientific, philosophical, religious and social interests, there is nothing and there can be nothing that could give the possibilities that are contained in the ways. The ways lead or should lead someone to immortality. Everyday life, even at its best, leads us to death and can lead to nothing else. The idea of the ways cannot be understood, if the possibility of man's evolution without their help is admitted. As a rule, it is hard for someone to reconcile themselves to this thought. It seems to them exaggerated, unjust and even absurd. They have a poor understanding of the word possibility. They fancy that if they have any possibilities within themselves they must be developed, and there must be means for development within their environment. From a total refusal to acknowledge within themselves any possibilities whatsoever, one generally proceeds to demand the imperative and inevitable development of these possibilities. It is difficult for us to accept the thought that our potential may remain altogether undeveloped and disappear. That our development, on the other hand, requires of us tremendous effort and endurance. If we took all the people that are neither fakirs, monks nor yogis and of whom we might say with confidence that they will never become fakirs, monks or yogis, then we might say with certainty that their possibilities cannot be developed, and will not be developed. This must be understood in order to understand what follows.